We actually did have record turnout for the primary, 1.9 million voters, 1.9 million people voted. We had 850,000 before Election Day and then added another 1,050,000. And if you compare that back in 2018, we had a total of 1,150,000. And so our numbers are way up. That's almost where we were in the 2020 race in a presidential year. So we had record turnout, all forms of voting. And you have to understand, Neil, that when we passed the Election Integrity Act of 2021, everyone said it was going to decrease turnout.
I remember.
We told them there's no truth to that. We had 17 days of early voting. Voters came out 3 weeks. They had 2 Saturdays. So we had record early voting turnout, and then we had record Election Day turnout.
That is Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger indicating something that few people thought would be the case when Georgia changed its election laws. Remember, they were deemed racist, Jim Crow. We saw Major League Baseball skip Georgia as the site of the All-Star game because of these new laws. Well, they actually spurred more voting. About 40% more voting on the part of Democrats, 70% more on the part of Republicans, but numbers that were so off the charts that there were long lines on a primary day, no less. So while the drama seemed to be around on Election Day this past Tuesday in Georgia on the Trump bump not working for at least 2 key races, the former president saw that his major endorsements did not win. But in this particular story, something that all Republicans seem to be celebrating by saying the law that was vilified in the press and the media was just not that bad, and it did a lot of good. With us right now, Susan Crabtree of RealClearPolitics. Susan, it was remarkable. I don't know what happens now or whether anyone comes back to Georgia and says, all right, we overstated it. But what did you think?
Well, you know, Stacey Abrams had a pretty bad week this week. She was really struggling to answer these questions, and she's still identifying as the winner of Georgia's gubernatorial race in 2018, even though there was 55,000 votes that were in favor of Brian Kemp. So I don't know why she's still getting away with that. And she had a struggling time when she was asked about this at a press conference and saying, you know, is this voter suppression? You said it was going to be Jim Crow 2.0 and Jim Crow on steroids. What's happening here? And she said, well, it was a correlation without causation, and stuck to her guns on that. But, you know, that's not going to play very well when we had record turnout, and especially among African Americans and minority voters. You had, in fact, you had 4 times as many Black voters cast ballots early this year, and Hispanic and Asian communities also turned out in record numbers. So I just really think she's going to have a hard time selling that. We all know what was happening during the pandemic, that Democrats wanted to federalize those laws and keep those laws in place because they felt they benefited them, according to, you know, a lot of the mail-in votes and the easier participation, looser rules there. But, you know, Republicans stood up and said, no, we want voter ID, and we're going to make it easier to vote, but harder to cheat.
Yeah, and it was hardly racist. I mean, one of the things that occurred to me here is that a lot of these rules, you know, to make it easier to vote during the height of COVID, they made a lot of sense so people would be safe rather than going to the polls and risk getting sick or in harm's way. Now it was time to unwind them. Leaving that aside, I do notice that Stacey Abrams also stepped in it with remarks she made about how Georgia is not a shining example, that it's among the worst states in a lot of key areas. That might or might not be true in these specific issues she raised, but I'm not sure that is a very productive kind of a position to take if you're running for governor of a state.
Well, yes, and I think that's going to hurt her in the long run. It's going to be a tough race, and no doubt about it, because she has done an extraordinary job in terms of registering Democrats. She had 800,000 new Democrats registered because of her efforts since the 2018 gubernatorial contest against Brian Kemp. So, you know, that's going to be tough to beat. But when it comes to standing up for her state, those were really poorly made comments this week. And also, she has to account for the fact that she cost the state tens of millions of dollars when she had the Major League Baseball remove the All-Star game. And that was what she apologized for that. And she said she didn't mean it. But when she calls the new voting integrity rules Jim Crow 2.0, that led to all of these boycotts across the country.
Yeah, just bizarre. It reminds me of that Ray Donovan, the Labor Secretary to Ronald Reagan, after he was completely exonerated on some charges, almost 24 charges, of anything from conspiracy to embezzling funds. He would say after the end, how do I get my good name back? How does Georgia get its good name back after all of this? Thank you very, very much, Susan Crabtree of Real Clear Politics.